Hello, everybody. Hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Kmart, and I want to talk about some basketball. And today, we are carrying on with our early offseason preview series, taking a look at each of the teams in the league and some of the sort of early questions that these teams need to answer here as we move into this offseason period. So, we have been making our way up and down the list of teams here, and today we are going to be taking a look at the Phoenix Suns. The Suns who made quite a splash here over the last, let's say what, like year, 18 months or so, right? They go out, they get Kevin Durant. They just recently completed a trade for Bradley Beal, so the face of this team has changed pretty dramatically in a relatively short span of time, and the Suns have gone directly into that sort of championship or bust kind of mindset now where they're all in. They committed the assets. They went out and got the guys that they wanted. Now they have to go and win. Otherwise, otherwise they look a little bit foolish making some of these big moves and not getting a title out of it. But we'll get to that in a moment. For now, let's take a look at some of the baseline stats for the team here. I'm going to run those up on your screen right now. In terms of record, the Suns ended at 45 and 37. That was good enough for the fourth seed in the Western Conference, put them in second place in the Pacific Division behind the Sacramento Kings. In terms of their playoff record, they end up going 6 and 5 overall. They were eliminated in the second round. So, not quite as deep a playoff run as they may have been hoping for when they acquired Kevin Durant, but at least they weren't knocked out immediately in round one. They did get past the Clippers, if nothing else. But in terms of some of their other statistics here, taking a look at their ratings offensively, 14th in the league by offensive rating. Defensively, they were 7th in the league. That puts their net rating in the top 10 at 9th. Played with the 22nd highest pace in the league while having the 6th highest payroll. Of course, the thing about all of these stats is you do have to sort of look at them a little bit differently because the Suns obviously acquire Kevin Durant, and that changes the entire nature of this team. So those statistics are there, and yes, they are relevant, but they may not be a full reflection of what the team now looks like, having built around Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, and now Bradley Beal. So, they're there, but take them with a grain of salt, perhaps. But speaking of Bradley Beal, it is time to talk about the offseason additions and losses here for the Suns. We'll run those up on the screen now as well, and obviously the big one is Bradley Beal. They go out, they trade for him, they bring him into the lineup, but Beal was not the only person added to this roster. The Suns also used a draft pick on Tomani Kamara? Not really sure which one, but adding some young talent, filling a roster spot that desperately needs to be filled after they sent assets away to bring Bradley Beal in. So, they get a young rookie, bring him in here, see what kind of position they can find for him. But that does it in terms of additions. In terms of offseason losses so far, the players that they sent out in the Bradley Beal trade, Chris Paul and Landry Shamet, have both been sent away. So those are the losses for now. Those two names could be joined by quite a few more because the Suns have a lot of potential free agents here. We won't go too deep into it, but I'll just sort of list them off right now. You've got Torrey Craig, Bismack Biyombo, Damian Lee, Josh Okogie, Jock Landale, Terrence Ross. All of those guys were on the team last season. All of them are currently unsigned. So a lot of names on that list. A lot of people the Suns are going to have to take a look at in terms of who they want to bring back and how much they're willing to pay to do so. But, we'll see those decisions when they come. For now, we are going to get into the questions for this team. And question number one is about as generic a question as you can have, but it kind of is appropriate for this team. And that question is, how does this team actually work now? Right? So the Suns now have Bradley Beal on the roster. They've got Devin Booker. They've got Kevin Durant. all in the same lineup, which is just a terrifying amount of offensive firepower and scoring ability. But if you've been sort of watching NBA YouTube, NBA Twitter, there are a lot of questions about how these three will all actually fit together. And it's not all just hating on the Suns. There are some genuine questions that need to be asked here in terms of what position they all play. Position-wise, that part's a little bit easier to deal with. The team plays either Devin Booker or Bradley Beal at the 2 at shooting guard. Whichever one isn't the 2 could then play the 3, the small forward position, and you could simply have Durant play down to power forward at 4. You could also kind of go the other way. Durant at the 3, Beal or Booker at the 2, and then whichever one of them isn't the 2 would then play point guard, would play the 1 position. Either one of those works, right? Maybe someone ends up being over or undersized for their position, but in today's NBA, we really don't care quite that much about that. The only person that you truly have concerns about if they're playing undersized is probably your center position. Everyone else, there's some wiggle room there. But the question isn't about who plays what position. As I just outlined, that gets handled in about 30 seconds. The question is, will there be enough opportunities on offense for all three of them to play to their maximum potential, right? Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal are 3 guys who could go and get you 25 points a night with the snap of their fingers, right? That's just how good they are in the offensive end. But will they all get the shots to actually do that, right? Will they all have the opportunities in a game? Will they each get their, 15 to 20 shots or more to score those points? And I have heard the argument from some people that the point is not for all 3 of them to have those games on the same night. The idea is 1 or 2 of them does, and whoever the third guy is who's having an off night gets to have an off night because the other 2 can cover for you. That's not a bad thought process, except for the part where you talk about these guys making $35+ million to act as each other's safety nets. That's the part that gets a little bit iffy for me. You brought all these guys in because you're expecting a certain level of production. So if the game plan is to plan for one of them to not produce at that level every night so that the other 2 can, well, why did you make this trade then, right? It's a little bit awkward. It feels like they want to get the most out of all 3 of these guys every night that they can. So that leads to the question of, right, do they have enough possessions? Do they have enough touches? Do they play with a fast enough pace to make that happen? But perhaps more importantly than the offensive concerns are the defensive ones. How well will this team actually defend at this point? They were a top 10 defense in the league last season, and now you've got some guys who aren't the best defenders in the world. Kevin Durant's numbers, honestly, are still pretty impressive on the defensive end for how prolific a scorer he is, but Devin Booker and Bradley Beal are maybe a little bit of a step further down in terms of that offense to defense ratio. They're still not bad. In Booker's case, I think Bradley Beal actually is kind of a minus defender if you're looking at the statistics, but the problem is one massively offensive focused guy who maybe doesn't give 100% on the defensive end is fine. Teams can work around that, right? They had KD and Booker on the same team for half a season in Phoenix just this last campaign, and they still ended up as a top 10 defense because the rest of the players on the court were able to make up for that. However, can you survive having 3 of those guys on the court at the same time? And, very importantly, can you survive having those 3 guys on the court when the guys who made up for that lack of defensive effort, guys like Chris Paul, guys like Mikal Bridges, are the ones that you traded away to make these moves in the first place? That is going to be a massive question for the Suns. Can they find enough offense for all 3 of their stars, and can they play enough defense to make the offense actually valuable? We don't really know right now. Can't wait to see the team actually play because I genuinely do want to see how that works. But that leads us into question number 2 here. We were talking about that big 3 all the day long, but there is a 4th member here of the core for Phoenix. So question number 2 is, what's up with DeAndre Ayton? Right? What's the plan here in Phoenix for Ayton? We do have a little bit of an answer to that, but I'm going to get through the intro section first. It's no secret that Ayton and the Suns haven't exactly seen eye to eye in recent times. So the question is, what's the plan going forward for the two camps, the Suns and Ayton's people, now that the Beal trade has happened and Ayton wasn't involved in it? A lot of people thought DeAndre Ayton may have been the piece that was moved to bring Bradley Beal in. And obviously he wasn't. He's still on the roster. Would he be happier in another situation? Maybe. Would he be better off in another situation? I don't really know if that's true anymore, right? Playing with Devin Booker, playing with Kevin Durant, playing with Bradley Beal, it's going to take a lot of your offensive touches away, sure. But this gives Ayton a little bit of a smokescreen to operate with, right? There's been some questions about his own numbers, his own motivations at times. Now you get the chance to play in a pretty low-risk environment. If things go poorly for the Suns, DeAndre Ayton is not likely to be the guy blamed for a lot of it because he's simply not going to have the ball in his hands nearly as often as that big three. This gives Ayton an opportunity to maybe focus and hone his game a little bit more. Be more defensively oriented, focus more on the rebounding numbers, trying to bump those up, trying to make those consistent, and get your points off of, the occasional post play and offensive rebounding. Really kind of taking, I guess, the kind of game plan that we see a lot of the time from guys like Brook Lopez, from guys like Jonas Valanciunas, where plays aren't really run for them very often, but they still manage to get you your 15-ish points a game kind of number. That's the role that DeAndre Ayton could play here. And it's the role I think he's going to have to play because we've seen very recently some statements coming out of the Suns that they don't plan to move him. There was some thoughts after the Beal trade that DeAndre Ayton could be moved to get, 2 or 3 players back, spread his salary out amongst multiple players, and fill out what is a very shallow roster right now for Phoenix. But they say that they're not going to move him. They say that for now the plan is to move forward with Ayton as a part of this team. So he's going to have to find his place pretty quickly with whatever the new Suns look like. So it's going to be a challenge for DeAndre Ayton, but I think it could certainly be an opportunity for him to really focus in on what he does best and do that consistently. So we'll see if Ayton and his people look at it that way or if they remain disgruntled, unhappy, whatever word you want to use for it. But that leads us into point number 3 here for the Phoenix Suns, and that question is, what does the team look like around the core? So Kevin Durant is there. Devin Booker is there. Bradley Beal is there. DeAndre Ayton is going to be there. They've got 4 guys who have huge contracts that are not going to be moved anytime soon. So we look to the rest of the lineup, and it's an interesting scenario. We talked before about just how many free agents that they had. I listed off like 5 or 6 names. Pretty much all of the Suns' free agents are from the supporting cast, right? As I mentioned, Devin Booker's locked up long-term. DeAndre Ayton signed for multiple years, and now so are Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal. You've got those guys for 2, 3, 4 years down the road. Other than that, Cameron Payne, is still signed. He's in the final year of his contract, but he is signed to the roster, and that's it. Everyone else is a free agent at this point, right? So to bring back some of the names that I was mentioning before, guys like Torrey Craig, Damian Lee, Josh Okogie, Terrence Ross, Saban Lee. All of those names I just listed are guys who averaged over 15 minutes a game for the Suns last season, and now they're all free agents. And I know, 15 minutes a game is not the most impressive number in the world, right? I get that. But that was 5 guys who were all averaging 15 minutes. We're not talking about one dude at the far end of the bench who plays every once in a while. This was the entirety of your rotation. That was the whole second string right there that I just listed off. And each of them averaged about 15 minutes or more per game because they were all sort of rotating in for each other when Durant and Booker and Ayton needed time on the bench to recover. So None of them were particularly prolific in terms of their scoring output. You're not going to lose a crazy amount of offense with those players uh, being lost if they don't re-sign them. But those guys are essential to avoid scenarios where KD, Booker, and Beal and DeAndre Ayton have to play, 38 to 40 minutes a game. You don't want that. You do not want your star players to have to play extended minutes in regular season games just to get by. You need to have a second and potentially third unit that you can rely upon to throw in there and get your main guys some rest. The problem is the Suns basically have no wiggle room cap-wise because they went out and they got Bradley Beal. They were mostly able to match salaries sending Shamet and Chris Paul away, but that doesn't save them any money. That just kind of puts them in the same scenario. So the guys that we mentioned who are going to be free agents, they have to be retained on incredibly cheap deals. The Suns have to go looking for guys who are willing to accept the veteran minimum for their service time. They're going to have to look for, young players and draft picks. That's part of the reason why I sort of talked about Tamani Kamara, still not sure, as their draft pick being important, because that's a guy who, even if he's not good, he's a young guy who could go out and play you 15 minutes and get some of the starters some rest. So the Suns have to fill out this roster, and they're going to have to do it for relatively cheap, or they have to be okay with taking that big ol' hit from the luxury tax threshold. Either way, they have decisions to make. So, yeah, that is the situation here for the Suns. Very exciting in terms of the potential for this lineup. This is very much looking like a championship or bust kind of mentality for the Suns, but they've got to fill out the rest of the lineup as well. Kind of a situation that the Lakers were in a couple years back. They won the championship, and then they let a lot of guys go. They were content to sort of throw a lot of money at LeBron and Anthony Davis, and then all of a sudden you realize, we need to fill out the other like 13 slots in our roster, and we need to do it for cheap. So those guys are out there, right? We kind of know who they are. You're going to find some recognizable names making their way to Phoenix on relatively small salaries. But those are the plays that the Suns have to make. If they do it, this team's still terrifying, right? The questions about the fit, about who gets what, how many touches, yada, yada, yada. All of that is still genuinely true. Those are all real questions, and they will have an impact. But at the end of the day, the guys that they have, KD, Booker, Beal, Ayton, they're going to score a hell of a lot of points on you. So if your defense isn't up to snuff, you're going to lose. So the Suns are going to run over some people. The question is, will they run over enough people to make a deep run into the playoffs? We will have to see. But for now, those are some of the concerns for Phoenix. Very excited, as I said, to both see this team in action and see what the rest of the lineup looks like. But that is going to do it. Feel free to share your thoughts on any of the points I made here. How do you think the big three is going to sort of fit together? What do you expect from DeAndre Ayton here? Does he take a step forward? Does he regress? Does he just kind of do nothing and make vague statements to the media like we've seen some players do sometimes? But let me know what you think the future has in store for the Phoenix Suns. But until then, thank you all so much for watching, and I will talk to you later.